In the last video, I ended by saying that science and math may not seem important. Science and math are important. STEM is important for some of us. Like for Jonas Salk, it's important that he understood medicine and he invented penicillin. But we all don't have to create penicillin. 300 million Americans don't need to be scientific experts. We're not going to create cures. We just need some of us to create cures. And so we invent the vaccine for polio. Jonas Salk does that, and he has a chance, like, look, you can patent that, and then you can sell it, and you can get super rich off the vaccine, which is what we do today. But Jonas Salk's like, no, I'm not going to patent it. Everyone can have it. You guys can use it. It's more important that we save lives than get rich. Wow. Is this guy American? Who is this guy? I thought the capitalists were all pigs. I thought capitalism was terrible. Oh, wait, you mean that part of capitalism and democracy is that we can make our own choices and that Jonas Salk can just decide that, hey, you know what? I don't have to get rich. Oh, that's great. I thought capitalism was evil. So he doesn't really make any money, but he saves a bunch of lives. I should have ended with that. Before 1945, before World War II, here's how it worked. If we were going to war, we had our regular factories. And then once we got into a war, we'd say, hey, we know you're making cars, but we're going to need to stop making cars because we need some bombs and tanks. And so can you temporarily shut down the cars and start making stuff to help us fight the war? That was the way that it was. Now we permanently have the military-industrial complex. We have factories now that are permanently making bombs and tanks and guns and planes and anything that you can imagine. They make war devices. That's what they do. Before, you didn't have that. You would shift over to that during war, and then you would shift back to cars. Now we have permanent military-industrial complex. So if we're constantly building tanks and guns and missiles, and it's just building up, and we've got warehouse after warehouse of machine guns and ammo and bombs and bombs and bombs, don't you think at some point we're like, we probably ought to use some of that stuff at some point? And we do. More war, because look, like, well, they don't have to. They don't have to use it just because they have a warehouse full of bombs doesn't mean they have to use the bombs. Come on, man. What are you talking about? Yeah, they do. Because think about this. If we've got a warehouse full of bombs, eventually we're going to stop buying the bombs. We don't need any more bombs from them anymore. We don't need any more machine guns. Do you think they're going to be cool with that? No, what they need is us to fight more wars so that we will buy more weapons. No, we're good on weapons. Don't need any more weapons. We're fine for now. You can cool it out. Well, they'll go out of business if they're not constantly selling weapons. So they've got to do something. They got a plan. They always got a plan. So here's how the military-industrial complex works. And Eisenhower warned us about this, despite being one of the guys who helped create it and help fund it and initiate it. It's pretty funky that he's the guy who helps kind of get this thing off the ground. And then as he's leaving his presidency, he's like, oh, yeah, by the way, that military-industrial complex that I helped create, yeah, you better watch out for the thing. It's kind of out of control. And it was. So here's how the system works. Now remember, he's the guy who jacked up. We've got a missile gap, a bomb gap, a STEM gap. We're all so stupid. And he's the guy who got us to build all of these bombs. And conveniently, he's like, oh, yeah, you know those bombs I made? Probably not a good idea. So here's how the military-industrial complex works. Remember, we have politicians that get elected to the office. Well, they've got a campaign. They've got to run TV ads. They've got to do a bunch of stuff to get into power. And it's all expensive. Where do they get the money? From the military-industrial complex. We'll pay you. Like, look, we'll pay for your campaign. We'll help you get elected. But once you get elected, you owe us a favor. You know what that favor is going to be, don't you? So once they get elected, hey, guess what? Knock, knock, knock. That favor we owed you. Remember, we gave you thousands and millions of dollars to get elected. Now we need you to do something for us. Hey, how about declare war on Vietnam? Why would I declare war on Vietnam? We'll show you. All right, fine. We got to stop communism. There's a domino theory. We can't let it spread across the world. We got to go to Vietnam and fight a war. So we go to Vietnam and fight a war. Oh, cool. Well, since we're going to a war, we're going to need guns and bombs and missiles and airplanes. We're going to have to buy those from, guess what? This guy. Remember the guy that paid to get the guy elected? Yeah, this company. Well, now the guy that's elected is using your taxpayers' money to pay them to buy the missiles and the ones. It's not sitting in an empty warehouse. It's not sitting getting used. This is how they can keep the perpetual wars going for years and years and years. During your lifetime, we have been at war every single day. Since the day you were born, I'm assuming you're of a certain age. Since the day you were born, we've been at war, and we always will be at war as long as these guys keep getting elected and keep selling guns and missiles and bombs. Let's think about Afghanistan or Iraq or you name it. We got to keep the wars going so we keep selling the bombs and the missiles. Let's talk about debates, since we were kind of talking about, hey, you can get a guy elected. Once that guy's elected, then you ask for their favor. Well, there's these things called debates. They used to be on the radio, and you just listened to the actual words and you evaluated people on what they said. Hey, how about that? What a novel idea. We should pick our candidates based on their brains and their ideas and their thoughtful expressions and their articulated views and their understanding of complex ideas. Isn't that crazy? How crazy is that? Yes. No, it's not crazy. That's what we used to do in America. We used to choose our candidate based on their knowledge and their understanding of complex issues and their ability to articulate it to Americans. Not today, folks. That will change in 1960. We got Nixon is running for president against Kennedy, and for the first time, this debate is going to be on TV. It's not just listening and understanding. Now we're going to let our eyes do the working. And so we will watch the debate on TV, and the people that watch the debate on TV will say that Kennedy won. The people who listen to the debate on the radio, the people that listen to, let's listen to exactly what they say, their points, their views, how they articulate these complex issues. The people that just listen to the words of this 1960 debate, they said Nixon won. It's clear. Nixon won. He knows what he's doing. He has the experience. The people that watched it on TV, they picked the guy that looked better. They picked the guy that was wearing makeup. He wasn't wearing makeup, and he allowed them to show his bald spot on this camera. And so the people that watched it, they trusted their eyes and not their ears. And now this seems benign compared to what we do today. Today we watch these ridiculous campaign ads and debates that are nothing more than entertainment propaganda shows. It is ridiculous. And it would be one thing if it was just a show, we knew it was a show, and there were no consequences to these 3,000 debates that are on TV nonstop. But the reality is, because of this reality TV show that we call our presidential debates and our Democratic debate and a Republican nominating debate, this reality show has consequences. And the winner of this reality show ends up being the leader based on how cool they look on TV. We're not picking the smartest, the most intelligent, the most thoughtful, the most understanding. We're picking the person with the zingers on TV, the funny guy, the smart guy, the person that looks good, the woman that tears up the other guy, the woman that attacks the other man, the person who looks smart but's not too nasty. What are we doing? How are we picking the leaders? We deserve the leaders that we've got. We deserve the mess that we have. Kennedy will be assassinated. There are tons of videos online. You can pick who it could be. Soviet Union didn't like him. CIA didn't like him for various funding reasons. He wanted to investigate them. The Bay of Pigs. Castro obviously didn't like him. He wanted to try to get Castro killed. He betrayed the Cubans that were pro-American and the Cubans that were Cuban. The mafia was out to get him because he and his brother were investigating the mafia. After the mafia had gotten him elected, he turned his back on them. There's a million reasons. The military-industrial complex. They wanted a war with Vietnam. Kennedy was kind of saying, no, we're not going to go to Vietnam. What do you mean you're not going to go to Vietnam? We got money to make. We need to sell you weapons. If you don't go to Vietnam, we can't sell weapons. We need to get you out of power and elect someone who is going to go with war. And you could just say, this is this lone crazy wolf that did it. Yeah, right. So here's a video. So you're not going to want to look here if you want to see bad stuff. So turn away. I warned you. I told you not to. This is a Zapruder film. This is the actual assassination of our president for all to see. And who did it? Well, that's for you to go down an internet rabbit hole to figure out. But our government says, well, there's this magic bullet now. This magic bullet thing's been a little exaggerated. Not really a magic bullet. And, it kind of could work, or maybe it couldn't work. I don't know. Google it up. From my opinionated and biased point of view, this one shot that does all this silly stuff seems a little crazy. If you ask me, there was probably multiple shooters. If you ask me, there was probably multiple shooters, there was a conspiracy, multiple people involved. The government would rather you believe that there's just one dude and this bullet did some of this funky stuff that physically maybe could have worked. Seems like a stretch to me. There's a lot of different ways. I would lean probably towards the military-industrial complex, the CIA, and maybe Lyndon Johnson being maybe connected, more of a thing like he didn't make it happen, but he knew it could happen. Either way, these were the people I would think are leaning towards being involved. Do your own investigation. We'll probably never really know. Johnson will take over the presidency, and he'll try to do some good things. Medicare, Medicaid, helping out the elderly, helping out the poor, helping out children, young low-income children. He'll be the guy who signs the Civil Rights Act. He'll start Head Start. He tries. Now, whether these programs work and whether any of this happens or not, that's another debate for another day. You can go into that stuff, but what I'm really trying to push right here is the idea that supposedly Lyndon Johnson was trying to do all these great things for America, his war on poverty. At the same time, he was also fighting a major war with Vietnam. The government only has so much money. Where does the government spend? Does the government spend on Medicaid, Medicare, the elderly, the poor, minorities, on civil rights legislation, funding inner cities? Should the government take their money there, or should the government spend all their money on the war? You know what the answer is. The government spent all the money on the war. Meanwhile, he was constantly telling the American people, I'm not going to send troops to the United States. He came on TV, the Democrat successor to John Kennedy after he was assassinated, came on TV multiple times saying, I'm not going to send more troops to Vietnam. Meanwhile, the records and evidence show he was sending more troops to Vietnam to die. He was saying, I'm not sending more people. Look at me. I'm not sending more people. While he was sending more people. That's your government, folks. Lying to your face. Saying, I'm going to create this great society and a war on poverty. I'm going to fund all these programs that are going to change America. Well, you don't fund them. And most of these programs have, aside from the civil rights legislature, which really, we're giving Lyndon Johnson probably a little too much credit. This was Martin Luther King Jr. These were the activists. These were the protesters in the South. These were the Black Americans that were making this happen. If we're going to give credit, then we need to give it to the civil rights leaders. Martin Luther King Jr., Ella Baker, Wyatt Walker, A. Philip Randolph, you name it. We'll give it to the civil rights leaders, the SCLC, SNCC. These are the people that deserve credit, not Lyndon Johnson. And Medicaid, Medicare, Head Start, those have been some pretty weak. The intentions are good and thoughtful, but the results have not been there. The results for Head Start, not been there. The results for Medicaid have not been there. The outcomes have not been there. The road to hell is paved with good intentions. There's great intentions. We wanted good things to happen, but no good deed goes unpunished. A lot of these things didn't work. And we're probably giving him too much credit to put him on the same side. He did sign the legislation. He did help get some legislatures to help pass this, and he did some political engineering, but the civil rights movement was Martin Luther King Jr.'s credit. So if we're just going to talk about Johnson, Vietnam is his mess, and we're giving him way too much credit for this stuff over here. Consumerism becomes a big thing during the 1950s. Owning stuff, materialism, kind of like today. You guys want a bunch of iPads and iPhones and big phones and fancy cars and a Lexus and a big TV, curved, flat screen, super fast computer with fancy shoes lining your closet. This is consumerism. This was very big in the 50s, and it's back again today, also big in the 80s. There were some people that rejected it, said, hey, life is about experience. It's not about what you own. It's not about owning shoes or phone or money. It's about the experience. It's about knowledge. It's about having friends and family and helping others. This is the counterculture. They reject the norm. Normal society, the norm is then, and the norm today is to own stuff, to have a phone, to have a YouTube channel, to do a vlog, to have fancy shoes lining your closets, to have all this stuff. That's the norm. Everybody wants to have that. The counterculture, counter meaning against the normal culture, people said no. The people growing up in the 50s and the 60s, the counterculture said, no, it's not about owning stuff. It's about experiencing life. It's about experiencing people. It's about building relationships with your friends, your family, your community. It's about doing. It's not about owning. It's about doing and experiencing. It's not about owning and having. And so the counterculture will lead from the beatniks to the hippies. They will be against culture, will be against war, mainly progressive, liberal, open-minded, pro-minority, pro-women versus kind of a conservative traditional way of, well, we want things to stay the same. We want things to be the way that they were. And you could see on TV the craziness that's unfolding. This was often blamed on the progressives and blamed on the liberals. The conservatives and traditionals were watching these people that were the counterculture, that were progressive and open-minded and liberal and open to new ideas and new ways of life. And they were seeing all this crazy stuff happening on TV, and they're saying, no, we need to conserve. We need to conserve and protect the old way. We need traditions. We don't want all this change. So change versus, no, let's keep it the way it is. And the people that are keeping it the way it is are seeing this nonsense on TV like, look, we're right. We need to keep it the way it is. We've got towns burning. We have people rioting. People are dressed in crazy clothes. We need to keep it the way that it is. We can see during a presidential a convention, people are rioting in the streets. So inside a presidential convention, they're electing a person and they're rioting in the street, and people are dying in Vietnam or are suffering all these casualties. This is craziness. The world is insane. We needed to go back to the way that it was. You mean where minorities and the youth were mistreated? You're pillaring me. Well, who cares? You're kind of racist. Maybe, maybe not. Whatever. That's a common argument that you're going to get. So the conservatives and the traditionalists are actually going to win in the end. Their votes are going to matter, and we do go more a conservative traditional approach, and this progressivism and idealism will die out. And their guy is going to be Nixon. Nixon's going to come in with the Southern strategy. The conservative traditionals want to preserve the way of life. They don't want all this change. They don't want this radical new progressive ideology and liberalism. And he will come back after losing the election in 1960. In 1972, he'll come back, or 1968, he'll come back and say, look. I can help you conserve. I can help you preserve the traditions. I can return life to the way it was before there was rioting on the streets and people dying in Vietnam and people growing crazy hair and doing drugs and all this crazy way of life. We're going to return it to the way it was. And also maybe a slight tinge of racism of back before black people had rights. And he's going to turn the South into a Republican area. He's going to go with the Southern strategy and fight against the new way. And his big theme is going to be, how about law and order? And it's going to be like kind of a code for racism, but it's, and you can look at it however you want. So 1968, Johnson says the U.S. is winning. Viet Cong is near defeat, right? This guy who said, I'm not going to send troops. And then he sent troops. We're going to defeat them. And then the Tet Offensive happens. Now, Tet Offensive, exaggerated, probably wasn't as bad as our media led us to believe. You can read about that. But nonetheless, they put it on TV. It looks like we're losing, so the Americans believe that we're losing. Well, he just said we were going to win, and now it looks like we're losing, so we must be losing. We weren't losing. We actually won the Tet Offensive, but the media showed it as, no, we're losing this thing. It was ugly. Guy gets his head blown off. And the lead anchor, the guy that everyone trusts, says, this is going to end the stalemate. We can't win. So the American people see the media, and the media tells us, we're not going to win. The reality was, we won the Tet Offensive. It wasn't as bad as the media led us to believe, but nonetheless, we believe that we're going to lose. Johnson said we're going to win. He must be a liar. That's the way it goes. Kennedy could be the hope for the country. They kill him. Who's they? I don't know. 1968, Martin Luther King, the way of the future, progressive, liberal, new ideas. They kill him. Who's they? I don't know. 1968, new presidential convention. We're electing a new guy. Inside they're partying and, hey, Humphrey's going to be our president. Outside people are getting beaten and robbed and fighting, and they're setting fires, and it's chaos. This is chaos. 1968 is a year of chaos in our country. And the people, you have the new progressive liberal, and then you have the conservative traditional saying, look, it's chaos in this country. We need to go back. And so it kind of does make sense when you're seeing all this chaos on the TV screen every day. These guys are like, we get it. Maybe we should be more equal. Maybe we should have more rights. But the country's literally on fire. So maybe we should return it back. And Nixon pretty much promises that. And this video is a little all over the place, but hey, deal with it.